is a healthy habits coach, podcaster, a radio presenter, an author, and a whole bunch of award. She's won a whole bunch of awards, like all of the ones that she was nominated for, basically in the last decade. Yeah, thereabouts. So she has a lot of business experience and a lot of life experience. Los Antoneco.
Hey ladies, thank you so much. And I love having this little intimate group because so many people have travelled from lots of little places and they're getting to meet people, a lot of friendly faces. But I want to ask you guys, who feels like they are absolutely 100% without a doubt at the top of the game right now in their life? I knew that you would fucking put your hand up. It's like, bitch, you're going to stand on that table. But most of us, you know, we have these ideas about what it is that we want out of our life, and then sometimes we feel a little bit misaligned. You get it, right? And sometimes it can be something like, oh, I wish that my sleep was better. I wish that my body was better. I wish that X, Y, Z. Or I hope. And I call that the hopium effect. We get a little bit addicted to this hopium. It's like a drug, and we're always there hoping things. So today what I'd really like to share is a little bit of my journey. It's a little bit crazy. So strap yourselves in for a wild ride. It may elicit some weird sensations and emotions, nothing sexual at this point, but it may elicit some reactions to you, so I am going to give you a bit of a trigger warning, just so you know. So if you are feeling a little bit triggered, please take the time that you need through the rest of this chat. But basically what I do is I'm a healthy habit coach. People are like, I don't know what that is. Are you a health coach? Are you a personal trainer? So a little bit of all of those things, but none at the same time. I focus primarily on helping people unlock their eating, their breathing, and I always joke, breathing, ladies, not breathing. I'm sure some of you are very good at the breathing part. So eating, breathing, sleeping, moving, and hydrating. So they are the 5 habits, I call them handbrake habits, that are keeping people stuck in their life. Hence the poster. The other side of the poster was very inappropriate, so I put my appropriate grown-up poster up today. But I call those handbrake habits. So if you can imagine you're driving around in your car, you're like driving a Ferrari, aren't y'all? It's like driving around with handbrakes on, and most of us are driving around with at least multiple handbrakes on. So if you can unlock one of those handbrakes, what you find is you can start getting a little bit more momentum. Who here has driven a car with handbrakes on before? Totally, right? You can totally drive a car with handbrakes on. People are like, oh, you can't. I'm like, no, you can. Yeah. It beeps at you and it gives you warning lights and it's like, bitch, what are you doing? And then, but then you can still drive it, right? But what's going to happen? It's going to wear out really fast and you're not going to go very far. So what I'd like to do is share some of my story today and how I got here. I believe that everybody is capable of living an unstoppable life, and I believe that I actually live a very unstoppable life despite some of the challenges that I face. But this all started back when I was a kid. So as a kid, I'm the oldest of 3, grew up in Ipswich, still live in Ipswich. Woo!
Hell yeah!
From Ipswich here, right? A majority of the people, but I'm kidding. But yeah, born and bred in Ipswich, and my father was in the military and my mum was a nurse. So, oldest of 3 kids. Who here is an oldest child? Yeah, right?
That's my favourite,
It's a thing, right? So I always found from a very young age there were a lot of expectations on me to be the leader. Now I only know this in retrospect, but I realised that most of my life was engineered around the expectations and the belief systems of my dad. Now being in the military, my dad was very regimented. Now my dad has Asperger's. He also has a form of autism, and he also has ADHD, and he's also a narcissist. Who here knows what a narcissist is? Right? Now, I did not know any of these things until I became an adult, but as a child, it was really, really, really hard for me to earn my dad's love. So my mum, she's a nurse, she's empathetic, she's compassionate, she loves everybody, she's a midwife too, so she like hugs babies for a living, that's what I joke about. But very easy to get her love. But my dad, the only way I could earn his love was through achievement. And so through my entire life, I've realised that my entire wiring of who I am has been linked to achievement in order to feel happy and accepted. Who here relates? Right? And this has become this part of my personality that I refer to as the hyperachiever. So as a child, because I'm here trying to learn all these things and earn my dad's love and respect, I'm having to do this by being good at absolutely everything. So I was bullied as a kid tremendously. I had a big nose. I've had a nose job, by the way. I had no boobs. I bought some. And I had a big butt. I work out in the gym. And big butts are in trend now, so it's okay. But As a child, I was teased a lot for the way that I looked. So I'm really glad that that happened because it forced me to have to find an identity through other sources of achievement. So I was never the pretty girl, I was never the popular girl, but what I did was I became really smart. So I loved drama, and I would excel in dramatic arts, and I would do a lot of theatrical stuff, and I would join all the theatre sports teams. I would be on the debating team. I was in all the premier teams at school for all of the sport. I was captain of all the sporting teams. I played basketball for Queensland. I was amazing at music, and I would excel in all of these things. But what I didn't realise, guys, was that was actually creating this really acute stress in my life. And Erin and I were just talking about this. As a child, sometimes a situation may have only been a 4 out of 10 stress, but in my brain, I would register that as a 10 out of 10. I was constantly stressed. I'd have to go on stress relief at school in certain situations. Every time I got my period as a young woman, I'd have to have a week off because my body couldn't handle the level of stress. But I went through my entire school career just living like that. At the end of year 12, something happened, and I don't think I realised what impact this would have on my life. We had breakup, and we had pizza, and the pizza went cold, and it got reheated, and it went cold, and it got reheated, and I ended up with gastro. This is why I talk about this after the meeting. I didn't realise it actually developed something called Helicobacter pylori. Who knows about that? The integrative practitioner and the other people, right? So I ended up having to get a medication and high-dose antibiotics to get that sorted. Now, at the time, I didn't think anything of it, but this became the trigger for where I kind of would become sick as an adult and identify as a sick person. So, out of school, got a scholarship into uni, hyperachiever, did information technology, changed degrees 4 times in 5 years because I didn't know what I wanted to do because I was a kid that was smart at everything. I got an OP3. OP3s are very high, OP1s are higher. So what's the lowest? Like a 60. So, and I was disappointed with myself. My dad was disappointed with me for not getting an OP2. That's the kind of guy he was. But I went to university, and halfway through my university degree, I got really, really, really sick. All of a sudden, I started getting gut problems. All of a sudden, I was having symptoms that nobody could explain. I started developing intolerances to everything. I went down the mainstream medical path, and it sucked. I was getting pushed and pulled from one practitioner to another, getting put on antibiotics for this, and all of these things. But through all this process, I met the love of my life, and things started to change. So I met a lovely guy called Ryan. I was working at McDonald's drive-thru at the time. I wasn't looking after myself, and when you do IT at uni, you're eating a lot of crap and you're drinking a lot of caffeine to do late night programming. But when I met Brian, he was fit, he was Ukraine Chinese, so you can imagine like really good looking, like Eurasian. And I fell in love with him, and he was working for Disability Services at the time, so he was a loving, kind, caring guy. And I've never experienced somebody like that before in my life. So as I started getting sick, he was there to hold my hand. Now, at some point, I started pooping blood, and I started losing weight. And very quickly, my weight rapidly went down to 40 kilos. This wasn't long after meeting Brian. And I got very, very sick and ended up in hospital. And nobody knew what was wrong with me, so I'm having all this exploratory procedures trying to work out what's wrong. And they diagnosed me with a condition called ulcerative colitis. Who knows, yes? Who knows what inflammatory bowel disease is? Who knows what Crohn's disease is? Who's heard of Crohn's disease? Yep. So inflammatory bowel disease can present itself in multiple ways. It's an autoimmune disease where your body attacks itself. So you actually have an overactive immune system, and your body thinks that things are attacking it, so then it attacks itself. Essentially, that's a really crappy way of explaining it, right? I'm looking, staring at the doctor. She's like, yeah. So where mine attacks me is in my bowel. It bleeds, it alters. It's like period pain times 1,000. At the same time, they diagnosed me with a thing called polycystic ovary syndrome and PCOS. And then the way that the hospital managed me was to go, okay, here's a bunch of medications. Some of these are steroid-based. Maybe follow a different diet. Maybe get off all of the gluten. And big slap on the bum out the hospital. Here you go. You're unstuck. So you'll hear me refer to the phrases of stuck and unstuck and unstoppable a little bit more throughout this conversation today. But that was my first experience of being told that I was okay, and I clearly was still very fucked up. So, in 6 months, being on steroids and a gluten-free diet, I gained 26.5 kilos. So I didn't realise that the gluten-free food that I was eating, I'm a beauty student, right? I'm eating to eat shit, like I'm going to eat quick stuff. It was full of sugar. Where they take the gluten out, they put the sugar in. So I gained 26.5 kilos, hated myself. I was tired. They then diagnosed me with chronic fatigue. They then diagnosed me with fibromyalgia. They then diagnosed me with a thing called PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is basically you sit in front of the head 24/7. You're tired, you've got premenstrual pain and tension. And I got just slapped with all of these labels. But according to the system, I was not stuck. I was very unstuck and I hated myself. What do you think happened to my mental health? Yep. I started developing anxiety about everything. I was scared of dying. I was scared of pain. I then developed depression. I then got put on antidepressants for 8 years. I didn't know who I was anymore. And Brian stuck with me through all of that. So I ended up marrying Brian on the 10th of the 10th, 2010. It was a beach wedding at the Sunshine Coast, and we had the worst torrential rain in 11 years. People say when it rains on your wedding day, it's the best luck you can possibly have. And it was a really odd experience because I was dosed up to the eyeballs of medication, and I don't remember most of that day. I was in a lot of pain, I had a big flare-up, but that was my life. So, flash forward a little bit more. I started a business straight out of uni with my father. We decided to open a mobility store. I had no experience running a business of my own. I started running businesses when I was 15, sort of building computers and doing random stuff. But running a proper business was quite scary. But between us, we had really good skills. And even though we were very chalk and cheese, we kind of got it. My dad would do all the repairing of the mobility equipment and I would do all of the other things. So we did that for a while. But in 2015, on the 24th of September, my dad had a meltdown. I can't tell you what happened because I don't know what triggered it, but he hit me across the face with the back of his hand in our mobility store. And it was the first time I'd ever been physically attacked by someone in my family. I was the first person he hit. Now, I subsequently discovered my dad was having an affair. He then broke up my entire family and sent everybody into turmoil. He then proceeded to harass me. I had to eventually take out a DVO against my own father. So I literally got slapped in the face by everything I knew to be true about the person that I was and the things that I stood for, my way in the world, that I positioned myself, my belief systems and my expectations. They came crashing down. He then started going to all of my friends, trying to get to them, to get to me. They all blocked him, including my husband, Brian. Brian said to me, your dad keeps harassing me. He's trying to get to you through me. What do? Do I block him? I said, yep. Now, what my dad didn't know was at the time, my husband was experiencing some really, really poor mental health. He was Chinese, Malay, and Ukrainian. There was a lot of cultural expectations, and he was the oldest boy in the family to perform, and he never felt good enough. Now, he was gorgeous, he was strong, he was handsome, he worked out in the gym, he was training to be a bodybuilder, and he was trying to make his way into the modelling industry. But he was struggling with some really severe depression, and I remember one day he told me that he wanted to kill himself. He told me that he wanted to jump off something tall. So I got straight on the phone and called the suicide helpline and got him some help. Got him some medication and he didn't really take it. So on my 31st birthday, which was the 4th of March 2016, so remember my dad hit me in the face on the 4th of September 2015. 6 months later, it was my 31st birthday on a Friday. On the Sunday we were having a celebration at my house. We were having a barbecue. And I had my mum and my sister and my family over. And that morning, Brian's dad thought it would be good for Brian to get some fresh air. So he thought he would go with Brian's sister and take him for a walk. Now, I didn't know where they were going, but I remember they picked him up and took him out. And so I'm in the kitchen, and I can remember this very vividly. I'm standing in the kitchen, and I'm holding bacon in my hands, slimy bacon. You know what bacon feels like? It's like a little bit weird. And my phone rings, and I picked up the phone, and I still had bacon fat on my hands. And it was Brian's mum, and I just thought she was telling me, hey, what do you want us to bring? What do you want us to bring for your birthday? But instead the conversation is, I need you to come and pick me up, something's happened to Brian. What do you mean something's happened to Brian? He's fallen. And in that moment, I knew Brian was dead. She said, you need to call Martin. Martin's Brian's dad. I called Martin. And Martin, his voice, solemn. Hello. Martin, it's Lauren. Where's Brian? He's fallen. What do you mean he's fallen? He's fallen. I said, is he breathing? He goes, no, he's not. Is he alive? I don't think so. So I remember being in the kitchen with slimy hands, dropping the bacon all over the floor, smashing a bowl. My hands were cut everywhere. I had to hop on my car, drive my mum and my sister to pick up my mother-in-law and we went to a place called Boona. And for the first time, I realised what a beautiful day it was. The sky was like it is today. It was autumn, and it was blue. There wasn't a single cloud. And it wasn't how I imagined the day would be when I would lose the love of my life. And I remember seeing the cops, and I had to have a conversation. And they brought the van out, and Brian's body was in the body bag. And he was the first dead body I'd ever seen. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and they weren't quite closed. And he was so beautiful, and he was so cold. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because in that moment, all of my fears of death exploded. My heart broke. My entire sense of purpose and identity completely gone. And next year I'm doing a TED Talk about how my husband's suicide was the best thing that ever happened, because I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. So that was my first experience with death. And then a month later my grandpa died. And so I had the trifecta shit show, which would continue to plague my life. And I can't unsee those things, guys. But after Brian died, I did the most logical thing that I thought that I could do to start moving my life along, and I joined a gym. I didn't know what else to do. I needed to find a sense of purpose and identity. So the very next day after my friends came over and we kind of celebrated my birthday is forever fucked because it's always followed by that. I remember rocking up at the PCYC, which is my local gym in Ipswich. It wasn't 24/7 back then. And I went at 8:30 at night knowing the gym would close at 9. And wearing my baggy shirt, because I didn't like myself. I was very unconfident. My baggy clothes and my hat, I'd be in the corner on the treadmill half an hour before closing time. I didn't want anybody to talk to me in the dark. And I did that for many, many weeks. I would just rock up and I would go do the thing, create a habit. 4 weeks later, this lovely volunteer in the gym called Pat, old guy, been there for 40 years, piece of the furniture, and he has an accent. I can't tell you where it's fucking from, but he goes, love. I'm going to drop the accent now. Love, I see you here all the time, and Brian was amazing, and I'm really sorry for your loss. But I see you all the time here, and you look very lonely. And I'd love to show you how to lift weights. Now, who's been at the gym late at night? It's mainly guys, right? It's mainly guys. So at 8:30 at night, I'm propositioned by Pat, which we joke about. And he goes, I want to show you how to lift weights. And I looked down at all the men, and they were sweaty and stinky and grungy, and I said, Pat, I don't want to look like that, or smell like that, or sound like that. And he goes, well, you can't. Because you don't have the hormones, unless you take hormones and steroids, you can't be like that. So the very next night, instead of beelining it for the treadmill, I met Pat, and I went to the gym floor, and I felt like an absolute guppy. And he gave me 1 kilo dumbbells, and we started doing bicep curls. I don't remember exactly what we did. We did bicep curls, tricep extensions, and shoulder press. And I started with 1 kilo dumbbells, and he was very slow, and he was very particular, but he had an appreciation of teaching me how to do things properly. Over a period of time, because I would go every day, I started moving from 1 kilo to 2 kilos, and then 2 kilos to 3 kilos, and 3 to 4. And so in my mind, I was making progress, I was creating habits, I was creating change. Well, not only the tangible stuff was what was actually keeping me going. I'm coming over a few, by the way. I actually made friends. So all those stinky, grungy, smelly, sweaty men were really fucking nice. So I'm having conversations with these people. And all of a sudden, I'm creating connections and community. And I felt a sense of belonging. They were very positive. They were talking about food. I realized I had a food addiction and a sugar addiction. I went cold turkey off sugar. I started getting into personal development. I started meeting new people. I remember meeting Diane for the first time. And all of a sudden, I was cultivating this new sense of well-being and identity. I got into podcasts. I went to Tony Robbins. And in 6 months, so by the end of 2016, I had become this different person. I'd lost weight. I was feeling good. I thought, you know what, I'm going to do something really bold and really brave. I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition. I'm going to do this in legacy to Brian, because he can't do this. He has a tattoo. Well, he had a tattoo on the back of his tricep that says, I never give up. I've now got it on the back of my shoulder. And I decided this is the most logical, rational thing to do. So I'm going to get on stage in front of a panel of strangers who have no idea how much I've lifted, what I've suffered, what I've gone through, all of the grief I've suffered, in not much that leaves anything to your imagination, and be completely judged on my aesthetic. That's a very logical thing, right? So I hired myself a coach, and I began this journey of transformation. Now, to give you some perspective, most people do one show every 2 to 3 years. This hyperachiever did 13 shows in 14 months. Completely fucked myself. So, I became this hyper Loz. So I went from being Lauren, I started calling myself Loz, and the way I explain this is I got addicted to what I call the metric of success. So my entire life was completely dictated by numbers and success. At the time, I had lots and lots of photo shoots. I would shoot every single weekend. I had nearly 100,000 followers in Instagram. I would put tits and ass shots up. That's how you get followers, guys. Tits and ass shots. Tits and ass shots, 100,000 followers. I was on Instagram 7 hours a day. And when I wasn't on Instagram, I was in the gym for 3 hours. I was still running a mobility business. I had hired people. I had to grow up and hire my own staff. But that's a full-time fucking job. And for 18 months, that was my life. My life was dictated by how much my food weighed, my macro breakdown, how heavy I lifted. And so everything was about numbers. What do you think happened? Burnout, right? So along the way, some fabulous things happened. I met my soon-to-be, my husband, Michael. Met him at the PCYC. I had a habit of meeting guys there. He was a drum teacher and I was teaching Zumba at the time. And we had a whirlwind wedding in the middle of the Grand Canyon. And we had this fabulous life, right? But then towards the end of my career in bodybuilding, I was actually going to do 14 shows. Started pooping blood, started getting sick, body started breaking down. And all of the people that I had around me that meant something to me, because by this stage I had an amazing cohort of friends. So what are you doing this for? This is not what Brian would have wanted. This is not for Brian anymore. This is something else. This is a beast. This is an untamed beast. Are you monetizing this? What's your broader message? And so I stopped. I went completely cold turkey because I believe when you zig so far in one direction, you have to zag an equal amount in the opposite direction in order to find the mean. The mean is the middle. In the mean is the meaning. And so I had to find out what that was. And because I'm a hyperachiever, I just stopped. But I bought back 10 hours a day. I bought back 10 hours a day of my life. I didn't know what to do with myself. So I did what every hyperachiever does, and I went and studied. So some of the last advice I got from my last coach at my last show, somewhere here in the Gold Coast, I was on the balcony of a penthouse, and I was just about to step on stage, and I really wanted wine. And she goes, babe, why do you think about snorting cocaine? Because there's no calories in cocaine. You think the penny would have dropped at that stage. But I realised after being in that fitness industry that the behaviours that I were exhibiting are so normalised. In fact, they're encouraged inside that culture, in the fitness culture, in the influencer culture. It is so toxic. It is so toxically unbelievable. So when I exited that culture cold turkey, I decided that I have to become a better coach than the coaches that I had. So I became a personal trainer in my early 30s. And after becoming a PT, I realised PTs can't talk to people about real fucking life stuff. So I went and studied life coaching. I then studied nutritional modification to help people lose weight and feel good and optimise their wellness. And over 18 months, the hyperachiever studied 13 things. But I call it me search, not research, because a lot of it was for me. I needed to do it for me and start rebuilding my life back. So when I started doing all that, my businesses started skyrocketing. My mobility business doubled, then doubled, then doubled. I felt so aligned. I started focusing on how well I was eating. I started changing my eating and working it out for what my body needed. I started breathing properly. My posture was improving all of the time. I started moving more mindfully instead of flogging myself with exercise and getting obsessed. I started exploring other types of movement patterns, being mindful and connected to the activities I was doing and honouring the energy and doing things like flow and yoga and Pilates. I became a Pilates instructor as well. As I do a lot of things. And then sleeping. Sleeping for me was huge. I was living on about either one end of the spectrum, 12 hours plus of sleep when I was tired, or 4 hours of sleep a night. But I started learning all about those things. So after all of that started happening and I was getting myself in alignment, everybody started to notice. I said, what have you been doing? And I said, I don't fucking know. Just doing what I normally do, which is keep on going. And then I accidentally wrote a book. So I was blogging about all of this stuff, and somebody said, you should write a book, and it was just a joke, and I realised actually I can write a book, and then I thought I'd start a podcast. So I was actually having wine with Diane over there in the lovely fur jacket, and I was talking about this guy called Dr. John Demartini and how inspirational his work was, and I was at her house, and I was just going to show her something on Instagram, and there was a message from him in my inbox, and he asked me to interview him, and I didn't have a podcast at the time, but I said, okay. What am I going to do? So I started a podcast based on that one concept. And I realised doing all of this that you can achieve anything you want. You can achieve anything you want. You just need to not wait to be invited. Stop waiting to be invited to show up for your fucking life. Get out there and do it. Since all of this stuff has happened, I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, I've skydived over glaciers, You know, got married in the middle of the Grand Canyon on Independence Day. You know, podcasts, radio, writing for newspapers. I've got a TED Talk coming up next year. Once you realise that life is hard work, uncertainty and fucking painful, get on with it. Get on with your life. Put your habits in your priority zone, guys. If you are eating well, you are breathing effectively, moving enough, sleeping enough, and drinking enough water and not too much coffee and not too much red wine, you can do anything. So now I have a business where I teach people how to do all those things. It comes from lived experience. Through some of that stuff, there's a lot of stuff I haven't shared with you because it's in the book and I would like to read the book. But I've even realised on my book journey that, you know, I had a terrible experience in my book journey. I got edited out of my book. There was a lot of things in that book over there called the Healthy Habit Handbook. I got published by a company that sit under Hay House. They didn't let me put that in the book. I can't talk about my dad in the book. And I've realised that, fuck you, I'm going to go republish my book. So I've now renamed the book Get the Fuck Unstuck. It'll be published next year, the beginning of next year. I have a big bright cover. That's what the other side of that thing looks like. But the thing is, guys, there is nothing so painful in your life. There is no experience that you should leave unturned because there's always a face, a place, a time, and a space that you can share with someone else. Because the power inside of you in your story, of your pain, your adversity, can become your greatest advantage. And by sharing with authenticity and clarity and full transparency, you may unlock something inside of somebody else that they've been scared to unlock for a long time. I hope that's inspired something in you today, having this chat. In business, I still have the mobility business. I don't really actively work in that business anymore, but I have amazing staff who run that. But in terms of Loz Life and what I do, I work with people who are in business and I teach them and I coach them and I consult to organisations to help them foster cultural change, either within themselves to normalise those habits or within their workplace. Because what I find with workplaces is absenteeism is super huge at the moment. We've got a whole heap of psychosocial hazard legislation that's just come in on the 1st of April. You need to be on top of that. If you are working in teams, I come in and I actually help you guys deconstruct that with your team. Because at the end of the day, your people matter and you matter. And if you're trying to burn the candle at both ends by not sleeping enough, drinking too much wine, even though wine is nice, not doing those habits right, you are putting a glass ceiling on your potential to do more and to give more and to serve more. So I hope that that's inspired you to make some changes today, guys, because if I can do it, you can do it. And I chronically live with pain. I have a medical marijuana prescription. I have to use it, right? I have chronic pain. I have a disease in my hip. I have autoimmune diseases through my entire body. I'm sick all the time, but it doesn't mean I can't achieve great things. Because if I can do it, so can you. Thanks for listening.
Any questions? Love, comments? All the questions? Go, give us one. Give us 5.
Well, yeah, how old was your dad when you found out about all the things that you had?
50.
So he lived his life and then found out.
Yep, so at 50 he got diagnosed and then they go, oh, it runs in the family. So then my brother got diagnosed and I actually got diagnosed. So I was 13 years old and I got diagnosed with ADD. And so I was medicated for that for a large portion of my life. I don't take anything anymore. But yeah, he was 50 years old.
Wow. So you guys all lived your beginning of your life with your dad like that,
Yep.
where you
Yep.
and like being so young.
Yep, and he doesn't talk to me anymore. He blames me for my husband's death. He says he could have saved him. Because I told him to block him. He's like, oh. Yeah, but yeah. And my dad is, look, he's got other things going on, and it's sad. It's sad. I've tried to reconnect with him. My nana just died recently, at the beginning of the year, my dad's mum, and at the funeral, yeah, he just started arguing with everybody and telling everyone what a piece of shit I was. So I'm like, cool, mate. Go live your life.
But that obviously says a lot about you.
100%, and I've matured past that. The old me would have retaliated and just gone all in, but I've realised that life, you just don't need to worry about it. You just move on. Be the better energy. Be the bigger energy. You said you had a million questions. That's
Yeah,
fine.
oh, now I'm like, which one's next? I'm like, what's your favorite colour? How old are you?
So I learned something from Carly. I'm 34 and a half plus GST.
I'm not 34 plus. I'm 46 plus Jesus. I feel better than that.
Do we have any other questions?
No, we just think you're gorgeous and amazing.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
that authenticity and vulnerability is what draws us to your aura. So thank you.
I appreciate you. And you know, and thank you so much, because there's so many people in here that are a really important part of my community, and you know, that is really what's gotten me through all of this. I had the same friends from when I was 8 years old all the way up to when my husband died, and I needed them for that. The reason I met them back when I was a kid was for that. And they kept me alive and they made me food, but then when I started changing, becoming this new person, they didn't like this new person and this new energy, and so they all divorced me. But now I have more friends and more amazing friends than I've ever had in my life, you know, and I'm so grateful, which is why my husband's suicide was the best thing that ever happened. Because without that, there's no way I fucking wear hot pink fucking lycra pants. Oh my god! I lived in 3/4 length camo pants. We all know what those look like, right? That's literally what I lived in, and so it gave me the confidence to be this person. And you're constantly evolving. I'm constantly evolving, right? My earrings get more crazy. These are the most tame earrings I own. I was gonna wear a pair that had a picture of Freddie Mercury on them, and on his shirt he's in drag, and it says "I want to break free." And I'm like, this makes no sense, but they're a bit too much.
I love it. Thank you, Loz.